Hey, Faith Carroll of faithcarroll.com here. Today we are going to be talking about dismemberment and astrology. So get yourself a cup of tea or get your headphones and go out for a walk. I've had a few people recently reach out asking about dismemberment, either because it came up in conversations or because of classes of mine that they've been in, or just being with other practitioners and the term arising. And I have been seeking resources for them. As many of you know, I love finding and sharing resources. And there are many resources that talk about dismemberment from a lot of different angles, but I couldn't find anything that offered the kind of integrated perspective that I have on dismemberment. My perspectives coming from archetypal astrology in the tradition of Richard Tarnas, coming from depth psychology in the tradition of Carl Jung and James Hillman, integrating that archetypal psychology of James Hillman's, and also integrating my research in new animism, in animistic energy healing, and my training in Michael Harners Neo-shamanic techniques, which I do not claim to represent or necessarily even really like, but it is a big part of my perspective on what dismemberment is and how it functions in our psyches. So as I've been sitting with this idea of what dismemberment is, and I'm going to go into what dismemberment is, I'm just throwing this word around, it really seemed like the perfect way to begin introducing one of the major, if not the major, archetypal transit, astrological transit of the 2020s, of this time period that we're in, which is a trine, a 120-degree angle between Uranus and Pluto. Okay, so it started earlier this year, and it's going to be going until like spring of 2032, I'd say. It again, transits, it's not a light switch you can turn on and off, but we are going to be affected by this energy for most of the next decade, and the themes of Uranus Pluto are very linked to themes of dismemberment. So I'm going to talk first about what dismemberment is in general. So dismemberment is a concept that we find in animist energy healing, in shamanic healing, and in mythology. And I mean, we all know what it means, right? Dismemberment is the process of our members, the parts of our body being pulled apart. When we are talking about spiritual or mythological dismemberment, there's a less literal interpretation of this. Dismemberment is a process where our egos are pulled apart, or where the various parts of ourselves, of our identity, are pulled apart. And though often folks who are experiencing dismemberment as a spiritual process will have dreams or visions, or experiences, journeys where they experience themselves being ripped apart, often in extremely creative ways by their helpful allies. Now, if you don't already have a relationship with your helpful allies, with your sacred guides, dismemberments are completely terrifying, because it does seem as if something is trying to rip you apart, and it is. So dismemberments are always linked to initiation. And the best way to understand this is to look at mythology. So some of my favorite figures, people who get dismembered, gods rather, who get dismembered, we can go all the way back to Osiris in Egyptian mythology. Osiris is the sun god, and he's also the son of the sun god. And Egyptian mythology, similar to Babylonian mythology, is really understood to be the early template of Judeo-Christian mythology. And so we see a lot of very similar themes and images in these mythologies, though, of course, they are different adaptations with different intentions from different cultures. I don't want to Joseph Campbell this and be like, it's all the same. It's not. It is beautifully unique, but we can see these patterns. So if you're like, oh, this sounds kind of like something else, that mythology that I know, yes, you are correct. And so Osiris is dismembered. He is torn apart. Literally, his arms are torn off his body and his head is torn, like he's cut up into little pieces. It's very violent. He's dismembered by his brother Set, who is often a kind of a shadow figure for Osiris. He's a trickster figure in Egyptian mythology, and his wife or sister, depending on the minute, and sometimes both, Isis, who is a very moon Venus figure. She's a healing figure, a goddess of miracles, of fertility. She comes in and she finds all the pieces of Osiris and she puts him back together again. And Osiris becomes the god of the underworld. And in this story, she's able to find all of the pieces of him except his penis. And that was eaten by an alligator. And so she makes him a clay penis. And so there's a way in which there's something about the process of castration in this as well, right? The being cut off from that which makes us fertile, that our creative source, our creative power source itself, right? Our procreative powers are what connects us in a lot of ways to godliness, whether that's biological procreation or our capacity to create through dreams and art and making nonprofits and envisioning a different world, whatever it is. And so when Osiris loses his fertility capacity, his reproductive capacity, and he is remembered, he is put back together, he becomes the god of the underworld. And we're going to talk about a few other myths, but I want to bring in here the archetypal connection of Pluto. And so whenever we are talking about dismemberment, we are always talking about Pluto. Pluto is the planet of spiritual. It is one of the planets of spiritual initiation. Pluto is often considered for humans. It's when spiritual initiation is incarnated. Pluto is the planet of transformation. It is the planet of oh my God, so many things. The unconscious, of rage. Pluto is the shadow. It's all that we cannot know, and all that we repress and hide for us and our culture, right? There's a lot of connections with shame and the occult and sexuality, mystery schools, that which is secret, that which is hidden. And folks with strong Pluto in their charts, either a lot of planets in Scorpio, a lot of planets, especially inner planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, connected to Pluto, or with Pluto especially when Pluto is in connection with the Sun or with the Moon, which tends to be most of the people who come to me for astrological guidance. I lost my train of thought. Whenever we have Pluto in the chart, we tend to be someone who experiences dismemberment. Sun Pluto people tend to experience the self, their identity, destroyed and pulled apart and then brought back together over and over again. Folks with Moon Pluto experience that more in their bodies, in their families, in their communities, in their emotional lives. Either way, these are people who are constantly going through incredibly transformative processes. And like the butterfly, it's a process where you lose all that you were. When the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it doesn't just like sleep and grow wings. It every cell of its body turns into goop. There's like nothing remaining of what the caterpillar was once the butterfly is born. But the same material that made the caterpillar remakes, and we remix it together, we alchemize it, and it becomes the butterfly. So when we think about dismemberment and we think about Pluto, we're thinking about spiritual initiation, and we're thinking about the archetype of the shaman. And for those of you who know my work, I use that word very carefully. And I'm using the shaman archetype. I'm understanding it as the shaman is the one who intermediates between the spirit world and the human world. This is a role that you do not choose for yourself. It is a role that is put upon you, and that is the community names you. In our culture, in modern Western culture, this is a community role that has largely been, it has been eradicated. Like, it has been utterly eradicated. And our culture has attempted, often to horrific success, to eradicate this kind of role, not only in our own culture, but in every culture we encounter through genocidal colonialism. And so when we encounter Pluto, we are always encountering that which we want to hide, that which we want to ignore, that which we are ashamed of, our own rage, our own capacity for horrific violence, our own shadow. Pluto is associated with fascism, with tyranny, with the atomic bomb, with utter eradication, with the apocalypse. Pluto is one of the death planets alongside Saturn, but something that's different. Saturn is the experience of the end. Saturn is that experience of your loved one dies and like they are literally gone. There is literally no way for you to ever connect with them again. I mean, the comprehensiveness of that ending is so complete. It is annihilating. Pluto is the experience of life after death. Pluto is the fact that we can then connect to our ancestors. We can connect to our loved ones through the process of psychopomp, through the process of reaching through worlds to connect to those that we have lost. Pluto teaches us that there is life after death, and it is the regenerative principle in that. And right, there's something about apocalypse, right? The apocalypse is the end of an age and it is the birth of a new age. Pluto is associated with volcanoes. I'm here on the Canary Islands, which is a volcanic island, and the rocks here are black and they're all magma rock and they have little holes in them. And living on this volcanic island has been an incredibly beautiful lesson for me as a Pluto person, into the nature of Pluto, into the nature of that which is dead but also living. Like vampires are super Pluto-y. Just basically like being goth is the most Pluto-y. Right, this understanding of the life that death gives. And so dismemberment. I'm going all over the place here. I appreciate you going there with me, just going on this journey. I'm not writing, I haven't written any of this down. I might eventually, if people want me to, write something that's a little more cohesive, coherent, but we're following the archetypes as they lead us. And so whenever we talked about the archetype of the shaman, and the shaman is the one who sees in the dark. The shaman is an edge walker. The shaman is the one who goes into the underworld and then comes out with a gift for the community. It's connected in a way. many would disagree with me on this, with the heroic archetype, but it's a different kind of hero. It's not like a, I did it. It's, I wish it's more, it's the secret. It's being in the mystery school. It's you go into the underworld and no one sees you. No one applauds you, right? There people, it's taboo. Folks who are going through Pluto initiations, often feel as if no one is understanding what they're going through. They feel as if they're going mad. They feel like they're losing their minds. As unconscious material is arising, as mythological and material comes into their minds, into their dreams, that doesn't have cohesive, coherent sense in our logical, materialistic culture. They're things that we're supposed to think of as like, pish posh, that makes no sense. I don't know why I turned British there, but I guess, you know, colonialism, the Brits, there's connection. And so dismemberment as an expression of the shaman archetype is an initiation that people go through. And you don't have to go through, you know, there isn't a one-to-one, you know, necessarily correlation here. These things are all just woven together. These are all threads that are connected. And that in seeing their connections, we begin to get a bigger picture. It's not that if you have a dismemberment dream, you are now a shaman. Again, that is a term only a community can gift to you, something that I see a lot that happens in our culture, because going through these kinds of initiations, psychotic breaks, losing your mind, or, you know, imaginal breaks, just feeling like you are out of control, like having experiences of things that cannot be real, having dreams or visions that are incredibly violent. These experiences are deeply taboo and are, you know, it's enough to get you ostracized. It's enough to get you put on medication for life. It's enough to make it so that you no longer have a job. And I really believe that when people are given containers to have these initiatory experiences in, which our culture generally does not provide, when they're given containers, there's a possibility for them to possibly become healers, to possibly become teachers, to become counselors, to become people who can guide others through the dark. But we don't have those kinds of containers in our culture. And so these experiences, these initiatory experiences, can be incredibly alienating and again, like annihilating for people. And even if we lived in cultures where there was an intact culture, a deep culture, where there was community and there were elders and there were people to guide us and to see us when we were going through these experiences and be like, hey, you're going through this experience. The spirits are calling you. You're being guided into a deeper expression of yourself. You're being asked to inhabit more of your fullness so that we, the community, can benefit from the wisdom that's going to come through you. I know you're scared. I know this is hard, but I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to guide you. Here's things that you can do. You're not crazy, right? All these things. Even in that context, going through these kinds of initiatory experiences can be deeply disturbing and frightening. But when you have archetypal context, like you do in a healthy culture, it gives you, you know, a rope to hang on to while you are being sucked out by the sea. And you know that you will eventually get back to land. For me, something that I really love about archetypal astrology, which is a spiritual and psychologically focused astrology. It doesn't focus on the mundane. It doesn't focus on like the basic phenomena of like, oh, this is happening. That means tomorrow you're going to lose your job. I don't believe astrology can predict such things because I believe we have free will. Though most people do not choose to accept the invitation of free will, and then often things, and when we are asleep, things often kind of fall into the lowest common denominator, and that's where mundane astrology can do a pretty good job of predicting what will happen. But the more awake you are, the more you are filled with your own self, the less the less we can know how the stars, excuse me, how do I say this? The less we can know your future, the less we can know what's, how a placement in the stars is going to affect you, or you it, because it goes both ways. So, dismemberment. Dismemberment, initiation, the deep fear of it. It's very intense. And we have these mythological figures to guide us and to remind us of the intensity, right? Osiris is ripped apart, but then he becomes something else. He becomes the god of the underworld. And gods of the underworld are generally the most powerful gods of their pantheons. And they may not be the gods who have the most power in a worldly way. You know, they don't make decisions about the crops and money or whatever, but they are they are the last god. They're the end god. They're the god we all must answer to. They're often the nameless god because they are so powerful. So in many traditions, the underworld god is another version of whoever the head god of the pantheon is. So, for example, in Greek mythology, Zeus is the head of the Greek pantheon, and Pluto, Hades, the god of the underworld, is often referred to as Zeus. You never wanted to say his real name. Pluto is actually kind of a fake name for him because which means riches, which there's a deep archetypal truth there that riches come from the land. All forms of wealth come from the land, you know, like from all the, whether it's an iPhone or I don't know, whatever, money, it all comes from what can we grow, what can we harvest, what can we glean from the land, what can we make from the land. And also speaking to the deeper spiritual truth of the riches of the soul is that which is hidden in the shadow and then brought to light and transformed into gold. And so I'm just checking in. Where are we at? What's next? Where are we moving towards? So there's great power in the underworld. There's great power in these experiences. And often what's happening in initiatory experiences like a dismemberment is we are getting access to our power. Osiris gains the power over life and death after he goes through his dismemberment. Other gods who go through the dismemberment, Inanna is one of my favorite examples. Inanna is a Venusian goddess from Sumerian mythology, which is really one of the earliest forms of mythology, cohesive mythology we have access to. We have documents, we have tablets telling us what they believed in, giving excerpts of poetry to Inanna. Inanna is my favorite goddess. And we have a story. Inanna has many beautiful, famous, gorgeous stories. Her most famous one is of her descent into the underworld, going through the 7 gates of the underworld, taking off her regalia, taking off her beautiful necklaces and her crown and her belt and her jewels. And she gets to the underworld, and there she is skinned alive, and her skin is hung on a hook. It's always kind of dark with Pluto, and not kind of, it's dark. And then after 3 days, she is revived and she returns to the upper world. Jesus is an example of the way that this god dismemberment myth was adapted. Jesus doesn't get fully dismembered, but he's sacrificed, he's martyred. And there's something about Pluto where Pluto is this soulful spiritual experience that is deeply locked into the body. Pluto is evolutionary power. It is the earth itself. It is the way that the earth grows and changes, not quickly, but over eons, over billions of years. And the power and beauty that is possible from that. Yeah, okay. Another great one of my favorite, maybe like the best example of a dismemberment myth is Dionysus. Again, a Greek god. Dionysus is not one of the Olympians. He's not one of the primary gods, but he is a son of Zeus. Most people know the story of Athena, who was born from Zeus's head. In many versions of the myth, Dionysus is born from Zeus's thigh, because Zeus swallows Dionysus's mother, you know, and oh, excuse me, that's incorrect. Again, there's different versions, and I didn't read up on my Dionysus before this, so don't rip me apart, you know, if I get this wrong. But Dionysus's mother wanted to see Zeus in his full glory, and he was like, this isn't a good idea. And she died, and so he saved the baby, and he stitched the baby into his thigh. And then the baby was born from him, and the baby was Dionysus. And then Dionysus is known for having these experiences of dismemberment. There's different versions of this. The most famous version is the Bacchae, the mad women, the ecstatic women who rip Dionysus apart. Dionysus is a god of ecstasy, of frenzy, of madness, of wine and beauty, and just like the fullness of life. And one of my favorite depth psychologists, a Cuban depth psychologist, Rafael Luis Pedraza. Oh gosh, am I getting that right? Here, I'm gonna pause and look it up. Okay, yes, Rafael Lopez Pedraza. Okay, glad I checked. He has this beautiful book, Dionysus in Exile, on the repression of the body and emotion, and he argues that Dionysus is a god of those who are outcasted, those who are not accepted, especially for their emotional and physical experiences. And so I really argue that Dionysus is a god of the sick, of the disabled, and of the mad. And I'm using mad in a liberatory mad studies context, understanding that the mad are people who own and honor their experiences of altered reality, and who are not victims, but are the what is the word that I want here? They are the authorities on their experience. You know, I really believe that madness is a collective experience, when often we go through thresholds of madness when we are breaking out of the collective unconscious and individuating into ourselves. And so that brings us full circle back to dismemberment and what its function is. Dismemberment exists in the world, in mythology, in our psyches, so that which is the false us, that which is not truly us, is removed and cleared, so that we can be fully us. There is something essential in this process of losing ourselves and coming back to our wholeness, that speaks to what it is that we're doing here on Earth, the reason we incarnate. We can't just come from the Neptunian realm, the realm of the goddess, the realm of the womb, we are all one, we are all connected, and just incarnate here on Earth. Boop, bop, beep. It's too hard. It's messy. We long for that experience of oneness. And to really become people, to really become humans, we need to cut that umbilical cord. And we need to give up our dream of paradise and accept and honor what it is that's happening here on Earth, and accept that there's a reason, there's a wisdom to this process. There's a reason and a wisdom to this beingness, this being here on Earth. This entire process is so that God can know themselves, so that consciousness psyche can know itself. And so in order to know itself, the opposite of itself has to exist. There is this false duality that is created for consciousness to happen. To be able to become conscious, we need to be asleep first. And when we understand what healing actually is, healing is the process of becoming more fully ourselves. If you go to an animist or shamanic energy healer, they bring back your soul pieces, and they bring back all the parts of you that were lost, like Isis brought back all the parts of Osiris. And in doing so, they fill you up with you. When you do spirit work, when you meditate, when you learn to channel and merge with guides, all of this kind of work, it is allowing you to more fully inhabit who you actually are, not the story you inherited from your family, not the collective story of who you should be, but to fully step into your own weirdness, your own deep pathology. My favorite psychologists are all about celebrating our pathology, because that is the path to our wholeness, our fullness. There is no perfection. There is no perfect version of you who's like, I'm never weird or obsessive or whatever. Like the more we become ourselves, the more our character reveals itself, the stranger and more fabulous we become. And then we can really contribute to the world, because we are really ourselves and we have something unique to give, which is what Uranus Pluto is all about. We're going to get to it. But so remembering, holding that dismemberment is a key process to waking up, to becoming conscious, and to inhabiting more of yourself. And it can seem really like counterintuitive, like, why can't we just be ourselves? But there's something about consciousness that, again, requires, consciousness is a dialectic. It requires moving against itself to be able to come into itself, and then moving against itself to be able to come into itself. And I'm going real big here with the concepts. Don't worry if you're like, I don't totally understand. It's okay. A lot of what I'm talking about, I get from the work of Wolfgang Giegrick, which is really influenced by Hegel, the philosopher. Giegrick is a fabulous depth psychologist who I'm currently very obsessed with. Especially his book Soul Violence, which, if you want something utterly mind-shattering and life-transforming and impossible to read, I really recommend you pick it up. So, but this is something, these ideas, you will find them in all forms of spirituality. And so we have to remember that healing, we forget, we think in our capitalist, perfectionist, Puritan culture, that we think that healing is being a perfect version of ourselves who has no flaws. And that is a freaking violent myth that is torturing all of us. And this Uranus Pluto trine that is beginning this year and is going until 2032, I really believe is an opportunity, should we choose to accept the invitation, because trines are always about accepting an invitation. The universe isn't going to force us. There's a real beautiful opportunity here to take what we have rejected from the unconscious and live out our own unique, brilliant weirdness. And I'm checking in. Is it time? Is it time? Do we get to switch to the astrology now? Okay, I think we do. Okay, so we're starting this beautiful trine. I'm gonna do other videos about Uranus Pluto. Again, I mean, it's gonna be for like 9 years, so there will be many videos. But I really believe that introducing Uranus Pluto as a time for the gift of dismemberment, the gift of losing parts of the self that are false, that are the inherited beliefs, social conditioning, embodied patterns from our families, from our culture, from the womb, things that aren't inherent to us, that losing this, we're going to be losing these things on a mass scale, on a collective scale. So that should we choose to accept the invitation, we can more fully inhabit our own wild, wicked genius. So we've talked a lot about Pluto. now we're going to talk a little bit about Uranus, and then we're going to put them together. So Uranus. So Uranus, again, one of the outer planets. It is just past Saturn. Uranus was the first planet we found for all of human existence until the 18th century, the 1700s. We thought Saturn was the end of the universe. That was the literal end. It is the end of human experience. And then we found Uranus, and it ushered in an age of revolution and electricity and innovation and radical new ideas about what it meant to be a human. Like, all humans are equal and whatnot, which, you know, obviously we haven't been doing the greatest job of integrating, but we've been trying. And Uranus is associated with technological liberation, with revolution. It was discovered during the Haitian and American and French revolutionary period, that like chunk of time. And I'm so in the Pluto energy. Uranus is our, as the Greek philosophers called it, our daemon. It is our genius. It is the one within us who knows us and knows exactly who we are and what we are supposed to be doing, that is utterly strange and utterly unlike anything that anyone else is doing, and is necessary. Uranus rules Aquarius. So for folks of you who are more familiar with mundane astrology or, you know, zodiac astrology, it's that Aquarian energy of very interested in the collective, very interested in what is right for the collective, in justice, in equality. But it's not like I care because my heart is broken. It's I care because it's just what's right. It's very airy. It's very intellectual. And in Uranus is the part of us that is a genius. And we're not using genius in like a colonial hierarchical ableist sense. We're not understanding that's like, oh, some people are geniuses and they have this very high IQ and they're usually white, able-bodied, straight men. And, you know, like we're no. We're letting that go. Though, of course, there are some people in every generation and every time who like really hold the brilliance of that moment, who really bring forward something from the stars, from something beyond. They channel it and they bring it into us. But we all have a genius within us. The question is, how does it express? Which we can understand by looking at your life experiences, your personality type, what Uranus aspects in your chart, its sign and house position. But it's like that unique spark within you. And there's something very divine about that unique spark. There's something deeply sacred. Uranus is the ruler of astrology, and it represents that part of us that wants to go to the stars, that wants to know like what's out there. Uranus is curious and takes things lightly. Uranus is a trickster, and is known for like its speed, and it just wants everything to go so fast. When we think of like Pluto, we think of a volcano. Uranus, we think of electricity. We think of lightning, zing, you know, it just makes things spark and flash. And Uranus tends to be, you know, it's impatient, it's genderqueer, it's you think it's there, but actually it's here. It's the principle of change itself. And in our charts, it represents our relationship to change. Just, we all have Uranus in our charts. We are not all into change. A lot of us are like, nah. So Uranus can also be our resistance to change. It can be our rigidity around change. Yeah. Okay. So Uranus, the planet of change, is in a 120-degree angle. Uranus is currently in in Taurus. Pluto is in Capricorn. They're going to continue this trine as Pluto moves into Aquarius and Uranus moves into Gemini. So it is starting as an Earth trine, right? Really about bringing forth a new forms of safety, security, material reality into the idea realm. New ideas, new innovations, new thoughts. Moving into those air signs. Again, I don't really hang out in the signs world, so I'm sure there's going to be some really amazing astrologers talking about what these planets are doing in their signs, and I really encourage you to go check them out. A lot of mundane astrologers, they're not even going to be talking about this transit till at least probably like late spring of 2025, when they are in an exact trine for the first time. They're going to go exact. Oh, I have my list here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At least 6 times. I might have missed 1 or 2 times, but they're going to be exact at least 6 times. This is long, people. Don't feel pressure about this. This is a big, juicy, long transit that we all get to just experience on the collective. I will do more videos talking about like how this is going to affect your chart and who it's going to affect the most, blah, blah, blah. But because Uranus is a planet of the collective, and because Pluto is, right, these are transpersonal, these are not personal planets. And Pluto is the collective unconscious, right? When these two come together, it's really about, this is going to define a generation. The world is going to be different after this transit. And the people who are born with this transit in their charts are going to carry it with them, carry this spirit of change. Again, this isn't a square, this isn't an opposition, or a conjunction, this is a trine. So it is a harmonious aspect. And trines in our personal charts tend to be aspects that we, other people see in us. They're very obvious. They are our gifts, our natural gifts. But for example, if you're a painter, let's say you have Neptune Mercury aspect in a trine. There is an invitation there to be a writer, a painter, to be someone who makes beautiful things with their hands, with their voice, with their mind, a singer. If you, let's say you love painting, it expresses for you as a love of painting, as a love of color and texture and shape, but you never pick up a paintbrush. You have this natural gift. Maybe you did it in high school, but then you're like, nah, you're more interested in your squares. You're more interested in the things where there's all this tension and grittiness. And if you don't pick up a paintbrush and practice, that gift isn't going to be able to give as much to your life as it could. It's not going to be able to support you through those more difficult aspects in your chart in the way that it is there to do so. And so this trine is an opportunity possibly for a little bit more gentleness around these themes, around the themes of revolution, tyranny, liberation, oppression. During this time, we're likely going to see disruptions of the collective unconscious. We're going to see liberatory movements. We're already seeing this, right, with liberatory movements rising up, and also tyrannical. It sounds like I'm saying Tyrannosaurus Rex. Movements of tyranny lashing back, oppression doubling down. We're going to see fascism on the rise. Pluto is always associated with fascism. It was discovered during the rise of fascism in Europe, and one of the defining, oh my gosh, was it a, yes, it is. I want to say this a square in the 1930s during the rise of Hitler. I believe it was a square between Uranus and Pluto. And it's so, right, this doesn't have to be a positive thing. It can be a negative thing. It can be like real darkness coming in. Again, this is a gentler transit, but that doesn't mean that the outcomes are any less real or serious. And if we want the good things to come out of this, we have to be working on ourselves. We have to be showing up, in our communities. We need to be like really being present with what's wanting to come out, with the parts of ourselves that we have denied or repressed. And we tend to think that those parts are bad. and we have stories about them. But if we deny or repress them, as Carl Jung said, those things that we deny or repress, they rule our lives, and we call it fate. But actually, it's just the parts of us we don't want to deal with. We don't, for folks in the Americas, the ways in which mainstream culture doesn't want to acknowledge its role in colonialism and enslavement, not realizing that in honoring this real history, we call back parts of ourselves, and we become a culture, we become a people who is mature and whole and capable of real relationship and capable of responsibility, and of like, when we honor the harms that we've done, something incredible happens in our souls. We become ensouled, we become full, we become whole. And when we deny ourselves that, we become more and more fragmented. So there's probably going to be, maybe I already said this, like technological advancements during this time. Yeah, and processes that have been going very slow, psychological, collective, and individual psychological processes are going to speed up at this time. And we had a Uranus Pluto square in from 2007 to 2020. That was like the defining transit of that time. And now we're kind of getting an opportunity to integrate a lot of what happened during that decade, during that 13-year period. When I think of Uranus Pluto, I think of earthquakes. And there's other association, there's other things to associate with earthquakes. In general, we associate Uranus with earthquakes. But like Pluto is the earth, and Uranus is shaking things up. And when, earthquakes are a beautiful spiritual image for dismemberment, for literally like the things coming apart so that something new can be created, right? When the earth is broken up, and I don't, when I'm saying this, I'm not discounting the very real, actual horrific side effects of communities who experience earthquakes. We're thinking about this like in a psycho-spiritual way, and for the land itself. It allows for something new. And so often in our society, we want things to stagnate, and we want things to just stay the same. And we just want to build, especially in our society, just build that Tower of Babel, like just reach up to the skies, not realizing that the cycles of growth and destruction are intrinsic to each other. If you want successful growth, you have to also accept destruction. And Pluto really teaches us that. Uranus really teaches us that. And for folks who are really doing deep spiritual work, there's a beautiful opportunity at this time to be honoring their deep self, to be stepping into their community work. And this entire, this trine, this 120-degree angle at the midpoint is Neptune. And Neptune isn't at the midpoint the entire time, don't worry about it, but especially for the next few years until 2027 it is. And Neptune is the planet of healing, of it is that planet of like the umbilical cord to the goddess, to God, to the divine. It is our experience of oneness. It is also our experience of illusion and delusion, of fantasy, of escape, of addiction. And so we are in the middle of, it's been going for like 70 years, I think. Should know this. Maybe 60 years. Pluto and Neptune are in a sextile together in a 60-degree angle. This is a minor angle. It's half of a trine. But it's not minor. It is a major aspect, but it's not a very powerful aspect. It's low key. But during this time with Neptune and Pluto in this sextile together, we are seeing a deep transformation in spiritual life. We're seeing people becoming spiritually empowered. We're releasing our need for gurus, for established religion. Animism is on the rise. Neptune, spirituality. And Pluto is the earth, and and the ancestors. So, right, this connection with animism. the living earth, experiencing the consciousness of the earth, the spiritual divine consciousness of the planet and of all beings. And with Uranus coming in to this placement that has been going on for so long, that just really defines our culture at this point and our experiences. With Uranus coming in, we're going to see a revolution of that. Things are going to speed up. I'm really excited. It feels like a moment of revolution for animism. And like some real fabulous opportunities for healing and for steps forward for the animist community, hopefully to be a more liberatory community, hopefully to be a community that really honors and acknowledges the roles that like settler colonial people have played in the eradication of animist traditions, both our own and others, other cultures' traditions, and an awakening of new relationships to these kinds of traditions, and bringing this wisdom, this understanding of the consciousness of the earth, the consciousness of all beings, into our lives, into our politics. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, I think we are getting to an end of this rant, this ramble. Oh, I just have a note in my little notes. I have evil genius, which, right, you have Pluto, which, you know, I'm using evil very lightly. And Uranus, the genius, right? Like Hitler, right? Like, just like we could potentially see the rise of some intense fascism during this time, which we're already seeing and is concerning. But I want y'all to play with embracing your own evil genius. You know, the one you're witchy cackling, like, I have these amazing ideas and I don't care about you know, forms of morality that are actually based in subjugation. I care about ethics of connection and relationality, and ethics of empowerment, and like, how is my evil genius going to express that? Is it going to be in art and music? Is it going to be in lectures? Is it going to be in undermining this shitty corporation's plan to extract from indigenous people's land, or extract from the earth in a way that's going to harm animals? Or like I want you to embrace your fabulous inner evil genius who has a master plan to undermine oppression and subjugation by breaking the rules. That's your homework, everyone. Okay. So to sum it up, we've talked about dismemberment as a process of taboo, often violent initiation that people experience when they are entering into like a spirit. They're being asked to wake up. They're being asked to come into a next level of consciousness. For folks experiencing dismemberment images, I really advise you to seek out a Jungian analyst or therapist, someone with Jungian context, or a spiritual practitioner who does a lot of shadow work, someone like myself. There's so many beautiful practitioners out there, people who are going to not shame the experience, but are going to honor it and guide you through it and show you the wisdom in it, and help you to become empowered through it. And who are gonna see that this isn't you losing your mind. And if it is, like, to be mad in a mad world is the correct response. And to end, you can find out more about my work or book a reading with me at faithcarol.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. If you want regular updates on my work, well, semi-regular, let's be honest, but I'm hoping to be more regular. If you want to get first notice on when these kinds of videos drop, and get the celestial news and all that. And if you want more of these videos, subscribe below. I really appreciate it. It really helps me out. And until the next time, remember, You're just a human. You're always going to be messy and gross and weird and kind of messed up and it's what the universe needs. It's what God needs. And God is within you. And here am I just saluting you wherever you are at in your journey. You're exactly where you need to be. Take care. Be well.